All right. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the fiscal year 2024 VATI guideline input session. We're excited to talk to you today about the VATI program, but we're also going to give you a little tidbit on what's going on with the BEAD program. And so I'd ask you to stay focused on the VATI program this morning. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to the team.
Hey guys, I'm Caroline Luxoy. I'm the program manager for the VATI program at the Office of Broadband. So I'm just going to give you a quick little glimpse of our program to date. So anyone who may be new here, the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative extends broadband service to currently unserved areas. VATI prepares communities to build, utilize, and capitalize on telecommunications infrastructure with the goal of creating strong, competitive communities. Since the beginning of the program, the VATI program has received 235 applications, which amounts to over $1.2 billion in requested funds. The program has awarded $935 million and through match has leveraged $1.2 billion. Those funds are dedicated to over 388,000 locations in different VATI project areas. And that's 87 projects awarded across 80 different localities. Just a quick little overview of our most recent year in FY 2023. We received 35 applications from 50 different localities, which, a little quick on the trigger, that's all right, which equaled to about $302 million in requested funds. Last year, the program awarded $59.5 million, and that includes one letter of intent. Through match, last year we've leveraged $118.6 million, and we welcomed 5 new localities to the program. And in total, all of the 2023 VATI program or VATI projects will connect 27,771 folks. So since, with the exception of FY 2022, VATI funds has strictly come from the state general funds. As you can see, in 2022, we had a large infusion of ARPA funding coming from state fiscal recovery and capital projects. However, with 2023 and now with the upcoming 2024 program, the program will once again strictly be state general funds. So we're looking at about $49.7 million for this year. This map can be a little tricky to decipher, but it depicts where all of the different VATI projects have occurred since the beginning of the program. So you can see that there's been a widespread. We still have a few localities out there that we're trying to get into the program and awarded, but we're proud of how diverse our projects have been over the past few years. And with that, I think I'm turning it over to Chandler.
Thanks, Caroline. Good to be with everybody again. Chandler Vaughn. I work as a policy analyst in the office. This is the point of the presentation where we're going over the 2 suggested changes in guidelines and criteria this year. I think most folks will find that that's less than usual in terms of changes and tweaks we're trying to make to the guidelines and criteria. Just to be upfront, and what our thought process was behind it as an office was we had a lot of good projects that we couldn't get to last year with $49.7 million available. We wanted to give the opportunity to streamline resubmission of existing applications, make tweaks and edits based on feedback from the last cycle. But the thinking from our office's perspective was to keep things close to the same, address some needs around the edges and interaction with federal funds, but mostly give folks the ability to keep rolling and resubmit their applications from last year with edits, with improvements for reconsideration. Out of the two edits we're making to the guidelines or proposing to make to the guidelines this year, the first one deals with the interaction of federal BEAD funding. I'll say the acronym once. It's the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. We've got a lot of upcoming presentations on Volume 2 of the BEAD initial proposal. And if you want to tune into the Broadband Advisory Council meeting on Monday to get a preview, we welcome you to do that too. The BEAD program is unlike the American Rescue Plan funding that flowed through the VATI grant-making process in 2021. BEAD is attached with its own unique set of guidelines and criteria and process that is mandated by the federal government and the administrators of the BEAD program for us to follow as a state broadband office. Because of that, we can't neatly route it through the mechanics of the VATI program. You'll find, and I think all of our stakeholders will find, that it'll feel like two completely separate, and it is two completely separate application processes. The connection to the VATI program is for branding purposes only. So you'll see here on this slide, and what the intent of this guideline edit is to clarify, and I'm not going to read through the entire one, skip to the next slide on the key points here, but reiterating that the BEAD applications and VATI state general fund applications are going to be scored, governed, evaluated separate of each other. We encourage folks to apply for both funding sources. Now, there's some intricacies there too, right? Local governments are the only eligible applicant for the VATI program in partnership with a broadband provider. But broadband providers are the only eligible applicant under the BEAD program. So what we recommend here is that local governments come in for VATI state general funding with their #1 preferred broadband provider partner. And then under the BEAD program, there's mechanisms for providing letters of support to one or multiple broadband providers. Hopefully you provide a letter of support to the one you come in with under the VATI program for state general funds if you're a local government. But we're encouraging folks to apply for both funding sources. Reach out for technical assistance if you think that you may only be a good fit for one of them, because there's eligibility criteria for both. The purpose of the guideline is that there are certain areas that are ineligible for BEAD funding. So, for example, RDOF areas are not eligible for BEAD funding. USDA loans, USDA grants, areas that, with some exceptions, require wireless solutions to be able to provide broadband access. This guideline proposes to give us the flexibility as an office to partially fund VATI applications for state general funds in areas that aren't BEAD eligible. It's our way to try to complement the investments that the BEAD program will make and neatly piece in state general funding in areas that aren't BEAD eligible. So, for example, the county brings us a proposal for every unserved location in the county for state general funding. And half of those locations are also in a USDA loan area. We can fund that with VATI state general funds. We can't touch that with BEAD. So what that preferred outcome might look like is we're funding half of the county in state general funding to shore up that loan area. And then perhaps in the remaining part of the county, if that's the highest scoring application under BEAD, the same provider is funded with those federal BEAD dollars in the other half of the county. That's how we're thinking about this. It's our way to make wise investments across both programs, but the bottom line is they're going to be scored, evaluated, and studied separately of one another. We've covered this by this point now in terms of general BEAD guidance and how the VATI program interacts with it, but our recommendation is apply for both programs. Reach out to our office early on after this input session and after the BEAD Volume 2 input sessions for technical assistance on that front. But generally speaking, apply for both and be engaged in both programs. The second edit we're proposing to this year's guidelines involves the make-ready process. So through our 2021 projects and now in the 2023 awards that were made most recently, we're seeing some challenges in the field when it comes to make-ready permits and other permitting and easement challenges out there in the field. So we want to hear more about how our proposed applicant and their internet service provider have worked to streamline that effort on the front end. It could be practices that are already going on in the field, or it could be things that are planned to happen and take place before the project starts construction to streamline construction. So we want to hear about what those efforts are that are taking place. This is proposed to be a scored criteria. In the Commonwealth priorities section. So you'll see some points adjustments there, but we want to hear more about the make ready process going on. So we're making wise investments that start construction and streamline that effort as much as possible. So that said, we're at the end of the 2 guidelines edits and the summary of those 2 guidelines edits. I know it was a quick review this year, but we're happy to answer questions. We've also got some questions on the next slide, facilitated Q&A if we don't have any from the audience that we also want to run through in terms of delineating between VATI and BEAD. So with that said, feel free to whatever your preference is, unmute, ask a question, raise a hand, we'll call on you. Whatever the preference may be, feel free to unmute yourself and ask those questions now. Jimmy, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chandler. So can you talk a little bit more about the timing? You know, it sounds like you're planning to try to run the VATI general fund process and the BEAD process pretty concurrently. Can you put some dates? And I understand their guesses are reasonable estimates at this point, but it just seems like the VATI cycle is going to be, you know, months earlier than BEAD, not because you all aren't trying to move quickly, just because there's a lot of federal bureaucracy involved. So can you talk about the timing of those 2 things?
Sure. Yeah, and I appreciate you noting the point about the federal approval timeline. That's our greatest variable in all of this, right? I mean, how quickly will it take the BEAD administrators to review our suggested awardees, get those approved? But the way we're trying to line this up is at some point next summer, we will be under the review period for both VATI State General Fund awards and BEAD awards. And at that point, we may request rescoped project information for VATI State General Fund projects, specifically for those areas described like RDOF acceleration, USDA loan areas. That's the goal here, is at some point those 2 review processes line up and we can carve out what investments make sense where at that point.
Okay, so the idea is, it sounds like the VATI applications would all be in and pending and scored, but you would probably wait until all the BEAD applications came in too, so you can look and see what makes the most sense across the portfolio. So really the timing of the VATI is going to be dependent on the timing of BEAD.
That'll also be a judgment call, right? I mean, if we're seeing that BEAD is going to be months behind VATI, we could be making a different calculation that come next summer of 2024. So I think that's the plan now, and the hope is to be able to make a educated decision if the award timelines line up. But we'll know more as we go along, and next spring you'll see timing mechanisms in both sets of guidance where under the BEAD volume 2, and I don't want to make this a volume 2 input session, but there's language in there that automatically triggers another couple of weeks for BEAD applications to be submitted if we make state general funding investments.
Okay.
So we're trying to accommodate across both programs to make it make sense if a project needs to be re-engineered, if we get VATI state general fund awards out of the door before BEAD applications are due.
Yeah, and I will say, just to kind of lean in a little bit, Governor Youngkin will be making recommendations of the BEAD awards to NTIA, so you'll know. We don't have to wait until NTIA does a final approval of what will eventually be BEAD projects. The governor will recommend, and so at that point we would be able to kind of delineate between the VATI general fund projects and the BEAD recommended projects. And we don't know what that process entails for NTIA on the BEAD approval process, but there is a point in time where we would have a recommendation and an announcement of what's going to go to NTIA for approval for NTIA for the feds. And so I hope that provides a little more clarity, that while we don't have to wait until the feds approve the BEAD projects to really determine the VATI projects. It's based on what's recommended by the governor.
Okay, thanks.
Michaela, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a more general question, and it may not even be appropriate for you guys, but we're having an issue identifying our actual unserved locations. We paid for a report through FCC, and we found that houses through our report showed that they were served, but then when I go to the FCC website, that same address shows unserved. So I guess what's the best way to approach how we're determining what areas are unserved or underserved?
Great question. We've done a lot of mapping in the office in the last couple of months, a part of preparing for the BEAD program. So we've got the best maps we've ever had at this point, and we're glad to schedule a follow-up call after this. I'm going to throw our resident broadband planner under the bus, Aaron Barnes. Aaron, if you could put your email in the chat, and Michaela, he's the resident expert on broadband mapping. If you can reach out to him.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Other questions? Spencer, yeah. Go ahead and unmute and ask the question when you're ready, Spencer.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Hey, good to see y'all. I'm going to continue to beat my drum out here in the West. I'm just concerned that continuing to place so much weight on the cost efficiency hurts the rural, rocky, mountainous counties. I think it's still 45% is based on efficiency of cost per passing, and naturally it's significantly higher when you got to choose between burying fiber and steep rocky terrain or going aerial when 40-50% of the poles are hand climbed. And if you couple that with the fact that you're not passing nearly as many people, I just can't see how we can score that well in that high, with 45% of the judgment going or the weighting going in that area.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I would say direct that into a comment to our office, but there's the 45% we're proposing under the BEAD program, which is a little bit different because providers are submitting applications for the same area and have to account for the same geography and terrain and build cost. Under VATI, I would recommend submitting comments that say guidelines should account for geography, terrain, and build cost, and go from there. Right now, the cost benefit index is 125 points out of 300. Just so we're all on the same page in terms of the cost efficiency weighting and the state general fund pool.
Okay, thank you, Chandler. I had to say.
Well, we've got some questions on the next slide. I'll only address the ones that I think we haven't hit on so far, or at least more directly go back and revisit some. I'm going to start in the top right-hand corner. Should local governments and broadband providers apply for both sources of funding in terms of VATI, state general funds, and BEAD? And the answer to that in our recommendation is yes, a local government should apply for state general funds with their #1 VATI preferred ISP. In the same way you've done for the last, I think, 8 application cycles now, come in with your preferred provider for that unserved area. But also under the BEAD program, there's in the proposed volume 2 a way for localities to endorse one or multiple providers under the BEAD program. So we'd encourage you to endorse that preferred VATI partner that you've come in with, as long as you still like him for the BEAD program, and then also consider backing other submitters as well. That is not an exclusive endorsement proposed under the BEAD program. So our recommendation is apply for both. Of course, there may be what ifs along that way, so reach out to our office and we'll help make a help you make an informed decision about what opportunities to go after here. We've talked about how the timelines between VATI and BEAD line up. That's the bottom left-hand question. Our hope is that at some point next summer, we have the chance to compare proposed BEAD awards and proposed state general funds awards to make smart investments there. And then the bottom right, just to reiterate, we'd be deciding on those proposals based on the eligibility of broadband proposals in light of BEAD guidance, right? So if we get a fixed wireless project for state general funds that's really well designed, that would be theoretically ineligible for BEAD funding. We would use state general funds to fund that project. The key, and this is to reiterate the first change in guidance, that fixed wireless project that we would consider funding with state general fund dollars might not be the highest scoring proposal, right? But since it's not eligible for the BEAD program or for BEAD, we would recommend that award to the governor's office, and then go from there. So I think that covers the what ifs and hopefully to eliminate some of the gray area between these two programs. But we're glad to answer more questions on that front and then also address it in the volume 2 input sessions coming up. Question from Mike Culp in the chat. For those with unfunded VATI 2023 applications, can you likely open CAMs in a separate window to cut and paste your prior application and review for accuracy? I'm not the expert to answer that question.
So if the question is, can we reopen, you can still PDF your CAMS application from a prior round, but we cannot our IT folks would be livid if we reopen a grant round 1. If it was open at the same time as the upcoming round, then folks would be confused. And so we can't reopen it, but just send an email to our inbox. If you can't PDF it, we can PDF it and send it over, and you can copy and paste it into a Word document. But we cannot, I want to say per our agency policies, we cannot reopen applications for folks to copy information.
Last call for questions, comments, input generally. Anybody calling in, this would be your chance to unmute and ask any questions, provide any input. All right, Spencer, go ahead.
Hey, sorry, one more question. I applaud the fact that the sub 25.3 under VATI is still, I think it's still receiving priority. It's not clear to me where those points would be derived, basically under what criteria section and how those points, and I don't know if that's a question you can answer, if it's just something that you read into across the criteria. And how much weight will be given to that?
It's definitely a question we can answer. I'll need to follow up with you on that one to go back and see how that's worded in the guidelines. We do give credit to it, right? I mean, I just need to go back and see how that's written and see how we did it last year.
Okay, thanks.
Tom, feel free to unmute and ask a question.
Hey, Chandler, I got a question about the broadband, the Virginia service territory submissions. I think it occurs late in the year, about the time that these VATI applications will be due. Do you all anticipate accelerating the due date for the Virginia service territories before the VATI applications are due?
I haven't considered it yet. Kicking the tires on accepting FCC submissions, which would be a requirement anyways outside of the VATI programs. I mean, stay tuned on that. I mean, we're cognizant that you guys are already going through that effort with the FCC and want to accommodate and take those submissions where appropriate. So stay tuned on that front.
Okay.
Last call. Well, Tamara, do you want to? We got a question from Mike. Go ahead.
Thanks for taking my question. Appreciate all the work that's gone into this round. I really appreciate the effort to combine these two great funding opportunities. Just thinking a little bit about the combined award. Let's say someone has some BEAD money and some VATI 24 money awarded. Which timeline rules? Is it the VATI timeline? Do we say 18 months for that particular case, or how do we arrange the timing? Maybe this is BEAD volume 2, but just a thought that I had.
Yeah, I don't want to give you the glorified government answer of it, the case by case basis, but I think we'd have to see how intricate each one was, right? Like if the VATI is woven in a way, the state general fund is woven in the BEAD project in a way that it doesn't make any sense to build out one quicker than the other, then I think we'd have to look at a longer timeline for state general funds than the 18-month with allowed extensions and the guidelines now. If it's something that looks like it's closer to an adjacent build that's already ongoing, then we'd want to see a quicker timeline with state general funds, but it would be case by case, and that conversation would be had in the pre-contract period.
All right, last call for any questions before we officially close. It might be the fastest body input session on record in how many years have we been doing? 6 years. And so thank you all for joining us this morning. Really excited about seeing what will come in for body. I will say, shameless plug, Broadband Advisory Council meeting will be held Monday. We will both be doing virtual and in person. If you want to attend in person, please send us an email so we can send that information. If you are not on our contact list, we will be doing a little deeper dive into the BEAD program at the BAC meeting and doing updates on all of our other broadband efforts. And so, again, a shameless plug to join us with the Broadband Advisory Council on Monday. And Chandler just put the information in the chat. And so with that, we'll go ahead and close out our 2024 body input session. And thank you all again and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Great job.